I'm sure most of you have heard of Dave Ramsey. He's built a personal finance empire that uses the baby steps as his bedrock. What kinds of alternatives are out there if you're not 100% on the Dave Ramsey bandwagon? Enter the Money Guy Show with Brian Preston and Bo Hansen. Their financial system that they have to rival the baby steps is called the Financial Order of Operations. We're going to break down the Financial Order of Operations, which they affectionately call the FOO, and we're going to compare it to Dave Ramsey's baby steps. We're going to go over where they differ, what's my take, and you'll leave with a greater understanding of how to build wealth in your life. The conclusion may not be what you think, so be sure and stay all the way to the end, and all I ask in return is that you smash that like button. Let's get started. Alright, I already showed you the FOO, but let's put the baby steps and the FOO on the screen side by side so you can take a quick look at them next to each other. Obviously, the first thing you'll notice is that there are only 7 baby steps while there are 9 steps in the order of operations. So they can be compared directly against one each other step by step, but I will show you where the steps align and where they switch order, beginning with baby step number 1. Alright, baby step number 1 is to save $1,000 in a beginner emergency fund. Now, some people might think $1,000 is impossible to reach. Some people might not think $1,000 is enough. Dave Ramsey knows that a lot of people in his audience don't have any money saved up in savings whatsoever, and they're living paycheck to paycheck and they have debt. So he's trying to get them to start building a habit of putting some money aside in order to get to that $1,000. And he recommends selling everything you own, getting a second job, eating on rice and beans. Those are what he recommends to get you to that point where you could start putting any money away. But he's trying to build momentum to take into baby step number 2, compared to the financial order of operations step number 1, which is to cover your deductibles. So this is different than just a generic number like $1,000. This depends on your circumstances. So your deductibles covered are including things like healthcare, car insurance, and home insurance. For example, you might have a $500 deductible on your car. You might have a 1% deductible on the value of your house. So if you had a $200,000 house, your deductible would be $2,000. And depending on whether or not you have a high deductible savings plan or not, your deductibles could be, $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, or they could be $1,000 if you have a low deductible plan. So your health insurance is going to determine the amount of deductible that you need to save in this step. It could be considerably higher depending on the deductibles you have. This does make sense to me because everybody's financial situation is going to be different. So as opposed to Dave just giving a specific number like $1,000, this is specific to your financial situation, and it also might give you a little bit more security than if you just had $1,000 in the bank. However, if somebody has significant debt and they have no money saved up in the bank, then the idea of waiting to save up, say, a $5,000 deductible for their health insurance might be very overwhelming. They may get discouraged before they even get to step 2. So for that case, the $1,000 starter emergency fund makes sense to get the ball rolling, get that momentum, and then moving on to the next step. It helps from a behavioral psychology perspective on money. And this is where Dave really stands out. A lot of his advice might not be strictly the best mathematical approach to finances and building wealth, but he does focus on behavioral changes and recognizes a lot of people have bad habits related to money. So if his advice can help you start to build good habits, get that momentum, and take the next step, then even if it's not the best financial step mathematically, it might still be the best step for you. So understanding yourself is actually a huge component of whether or not you're going to agree and ascribe to the Dave Ramsey baby steps. But I personally do like the FOO on this one. The idea of actually having my deductibles covered, that makes a lot of sense, and I like that idea. Moving on to baby step number 2. Now this is Dave Ramsey's kind of bread and butter. This is where everybody's calling him on his radio show, and this is where everybody's wondering about their debts and paying things off. This is the big step. This also takes sometimes the longest to kind of get through. He says, gazelle intensity, sell everything. You want to get a second job or a third job or a fourth job. You got to live on rice and beans. Don't spend any money. You got to get the debt out of your life. He's not wrong that debt's a bad thing when it comes to trying to build financial wealth. But for Dave, debt is the ultimate enemy. Now, if you know Dave's story, you may understand why. He actually was a millionaire in his 20s doing real estate deals. However, he ended up over-leveraging himself. The market changed, and then he actually ended up going bankrupt. So his concerns with debt are from a very personal situation that he lived through, going from millionaire down to bankrupt and then building back up to millionaire status again. I mean, I love Graham Stephan, and he's done a great job building wealth, but it might look a little different if he bought his first investment properties in 2007 right before a market crash. But paying off debt in step 2 includes all debt except your house. So that includes cars, personal loans, home equity lines of credit, no credit cards, and pay off all of your student loans. Everything must go except the mortgage. But he does have some criteria on the mortgage too that we'll get to in a later step. Now, the financial order of operations step number 2 is to take advantage of a company match. So this is the first step where they actually get off from one another. They do things in a slightly different order. A company match refers to a company's contributions to a 401k plan that they give on your behalf. They will give you free money as a company match. If your company offers a 100% match on, say, 3%, then if you take 3% of your annual income and put that into your 401k throughout the year, then the company will add another 3% to that amount. So you will have a total of 6% of your total annual income into a retirement account. The company doubled your money right off the bat. So it's free money, and if they offer a dollar for dollar match, then you just doubled your money, 100% return on day one. You're not going to get that anywhere else. So the idea of taking advantage of this right away, as young as possible, is a huge benefit to the long-term growth of your investments. Again, on this one, I definitely ascribe to the FOO. I definitely think that you should take advantage of a company match. Now, moving on to the FOO step 3, this is where they match up with Dave Ramsey step 2 of paying off debt. However, they do say specifically paying off high interest debt. So what is high interest debt according to the Money Guys? Credit cards are the main source of high interest debt, but you might also have other debts that have a high interest rate attached to them. Your student loans could be high interest, they could be low interest. You might have personal loans that are high interest or low interest. So how do you determine that amount? Well, in general, they actually say because you tend to have higher returns when you're younger, they actually adjust what is considered a high interest rate as you age. So a low interest rate for somebody in their 20s, they actually say is anything 5% and below. They say if you invest your money in your 20s, you're going to get a better rate of return than 5% over the course of your life, so you probably would benefit from contributing that dollar into investments than paying off a 5% loan. In your 30s, they drop that down to 4%. In your 40s, they drop that down to 3%, and really they say once you hit your 50s, you really shouldn't have any high interest debt in your life. Now jumping on to baby step number 3, that is having a fully funded emergency fund of 3 to 6 months. Now this 3 to 6 months is your expenses, not necessarily your total budget, because there are things in a budget that include savings and other stuff, and if you're talking about losing your job and needing to live for 3 to 6 months, you're not going to be saving at the same time that you don't have any money coming in. You're just going to be spending what's in that account. So whether you need 3 months or 6 months, that's actually a topic for another video, but the details has to do with how secure your income is, whether you're a 2-income household, and some other details like that. If that's an issue for you that you really want to know more about, put it in the comments. Now the financial order of operations number 4 is also the same thing. They call it their emergency reserves, but it's still a 3 to 6 months emergency fund is what they're essentially saying to do. So they actually pretty much align with the baby steps on this step. Now both of these guys, when they're talking about emergency funds, they're not talking about investing. This should be in a high yield savings account. This should not be invested in the market where it can have volatility up and down. This is money you want to have on hand in cash, so don't invest the emergency fund. Keep it in a high yield savings account. All right, baby step number 4, this is where you're going to start contributing to your retirement. So you've paid off your debt, you've fully funded your emergency fund, now you start caring about your retirement. So this is the first step in the baby steps where you actually contribute to retirement and investing. Everything before this has been savings and paying off debt. Now Dave Ramsey says 15% of your income should be going to your retirement. I'll quickly overview the order of retirement accounts they recommend using. I'm not going to go into all the details of these accounts. I do have other videos that talk about that. But first they say take advantage of the company match. Then they say go to a Roth IRA. Then if you still need to contribute more to get to that 15%, they say go back to the 401k and contribute up to that amount. That way you're taking advantage of your taxable retirement accounts. Again, if you have more questions on that specifically, go ahead and put it in the comments. The FOO step 5 says Roth IRA and HSA. Now their order of accounts is actually similar to Dave Ramsey's because they've already started with the company match. Remember back in step 2, you started contributing into your 401k to get your company match. Dave Ramsey's approach doesn't start doing that till baby step number 4. So now that you've taken advantage of the company match, now you move into the Roth IRA, and they say the HSA, which is a health savings account. Now, why would you want to invest in a health savings account? Isn't health savings accounts for paying medical bills? It is, but you can roll over the amount that you put into an HSA, as opposed to an FSA, which is a flexible spending account. That money you lose at the end of every single year. the HSA contributions roll over. So you can actually choose to, instead of keeping it in like a bank account, you can keep the HSA in investments. So you can utilize an HSA to invest. It's a great tool to prepare for retirement as well because it's a triple advantaged account when it comes to taxes. That means you're not paying taxes today. You get a tax deduction on your income for money you put in the HSA today. It's growing tax-free, and if you use it for qualified medical expenses anywhere between now and when you die, so you can still use it in retirement, you don't pay taxes on it when you use it either. So you didn't pay taxes now, you grew tax-free, and you didn't have to pay taxes on it when you use it if you use it for medical expenses. So it's a great advantage to not pay taxes on that money at all. Now, Dave doesn't include the HSA in his baby steps specifically, but he does talk about it on his show about utilizing an HSA for investments and for preparing for retirement. But for him, in order to get to that 15%, you're gonna just take the money and put it back in the 401k. And then staying on the FOO, we go to step 6, which is maxing out your retirement. So with the FOO, you've taken advantage of your company match in step 2. In step 5, you're taking advantage of the Roth IRA and the HSA. And now, if you still haven't reached their recommended retirement contributions, which is actually 25%, more than Dave Ramsey recommends, then you're gonna put that into your 401k. And if you end up maxing out the 401k, then there might be other accounts like a backdoor IRA or even just a brokerage account if you still need more room to get to that amount, because there are maximum contribution levels to the Roth IRA and to your 401k. So it depends on your income and what 25% of that is. Which brings us to step 7 of the FOO, which is hyper accumulation. Basically, at this point, you want to make sure that you contribute up to that 25% in your retirement accounts in order to grow at a hyper accumulation rate. That's a term that they like to use on their show. Now, ideally, with the Roth IRA and the HSA and the 401k, you're going to reach that 25% threshold. But for some people, higher earners, you might actually need to invest outside of that into a brokerage account that doesn't have a tax advantage, but you still want to put that money towards your retirement in order to save. And actually, if you're somebody who's doing the FIRE movement, the financial independence, retire early, you're gonna wanna be putting considerably more than 25% away for retirement. So you're definitely gonna have to utilize a brokerage account because you're not gonna be able to save, 50% of your income within a Roth IRA and a 401k. Going back to the baby steps now, baby step 5 is where Dave recommends starting to save for college for your children. This is actually why he only recommends 15% savings for the step 4, because he says this gives you enough margin to actually have money to contribute to your children's college. Dave Ramsey recommends doing this within a 529 plan or an ESA, which is an educational savings account. He actually doesn't give much guidance on how much to be putting away for your children's college, so I guess that just depends on where you anticipate your child going to college and how much you can afford. Going back to the FOO, the financial order of operations, we're on step 8, and that is where they have prepaid future expenses. So this includes not only college expenses and doing something in a 529 account, but it might be preparing for things like a future child's wedding. It might be saving money towards a future car purchase that you'd like to buy. Maybe even setting up custodial accounts for the kids or trusts or other things. So this is kind of where it's just a generic, like any sort of future expenses outside of your retirement, this is the step where you start to put money towards those. But until you're putting 25% away for retirement, you're not doing any of this. And then we move on to baby step number 6, which is to pay off the house. This is where Dave says, get rid of the mortgage. You don't want to have any debt in your life at all. Baby step 6, you're completely out of debt, including the house. Now, Dave has some criteria specific to when you buy a house as well to help you get rid of the mortgage as soon as possible. His recommendation is to put 20% down on a house and not have a house mortgage for more than 15 years. He wants to keep all your mortgage and house-related expenses, including home insurance, under 25% of your monthly income. And then when you get to this baby step 6, you're gonna pay it off in even less than 15 years because you're gonna contribute to it now. Now, the financial order of operations, step 9, which is their last step, actually says low interest debt. So it doesn't specifically say the house or a mortgage, it's any low interest debt that you didn't pay off back in step 3. But this is the step where you would go ahead and take the time to pay off the mortgage early if you still had one and if you desired to. One key difference between the philosophy of mortgages between Dave Ramsey and the Money Guys is actually that the Money Guys don't recommend a 15-year mortgage, and they don't even say that you have to pay it off early. Financially speaking, mathematically speaking, if you have a low interest rate on your mortgage, say 3%, and you can contribute money into an account that's going to grow at, say, 8% on average over time in index funds, then you would get a better return on your money by putting that money into investments and just paying off the 3% interest rate over time. Just leave the 30-year mortgage alone. I will say when it comes to behavior psychology side of things, again, what Dave Ramsey preaches is most people will get the lower interest rate and do the 30-year mortgage, and then they won't contribute the difference into an investment account. So if you're just getting the lower interest on the mortgage and you're not paying that extra money into your retirement accounts or into investment accounts, then the whole model doesn't make any sense now, because you're not actually taking advantage of the interest rate of the 8% growth on the money. So they call that your army of dollar bills. You don't want your army of dollar bills sitting in the house, shining their boots saying, oh, I wish I could be doing something. You put them in investments, they're growing at a better rate, they're working for you. But if you just put money into the mortgage and the other money you just spend, well, then you're not building your army of dollar bills either way. If you have a discipline issue with being consistent with investing, then paying off the mortgage early probably makes more sense, even though mathematically it's not the best option. If you will take that excess and invest it instead, then that's the better mathematical way to take advantage of investing and growing your wealth. And then Dave Ramsey's baby step number 7, the final one, is to build wealth and give. Dave is huge on giving, and he doesn't actually save giving till the end. He actually will tell you as part of your monthly budget that you should be using this whole time in order to keep track of every dollar and where it's going. You should have giving as one of the top line items. So giving is just a part of your life. It's part of your routines. It's part of your habits. Then when you get to this baby step 7, because you've accumulated more wealth, you simply have the ability to give even more money away because you've built the wealth and you've taken the steps to get here. And technically the FOO does not have a step specifically for giving, but if you've ever listened to their podcast or their YouTube channel, then you can tell that giving is important to both of them, and they would highly recommend giving, again, throughout the process, just like Dave says with your budget. There are some money philosophy differences here that I wanted to highlight between Dave and the Money Guys that's not specifically talked about within the baby steps and the financial order of operations. Dave says eliminate all debt no matter what as fast as possible. He does save the mortgage to the end, but he still thinks you should pay that off as fast as possible. He also says you should only buy cars with cash, ever. He also says you should never have credit cards, ever. Don't use credit cards. And he utilizes the debt snowball as a means of paying off debt in his baby step 2. Again, Dave Ramsey really focuses on the behavioral psychology side of money. He's trying to deal with bad habits. He's trying to deal with bad behaviors around money. And if you correct those, then even if you're not doing the best mathematical approach, you're going to be successful because you've changed your habits. Now with the Money Guys, they say, yes, you want to get high interest debt out of your life, like credit card debt, but they don't necessarily say that you have to pay off the low interest debt early, because they say contributing that money to investments would get you a higher rate of return. So mathematically, that's a better option, but it doesn't necessarily address behavioral issues if you have underlying bad habits that would actually prevent you from doing that. And a huge difference is when it comes to cars. They actually say it's preferable to pay for cars in cash, but if you can't, they understand sometimes you need a reliable, safe vehicle that you just don't have the cash for at the moment. So they give some guidelines on buying cars. They say 20% down, you don't want a loan for more than 3 years, and you don't want the total amount that all of your monthly payments for your cars, they don't want that to be more than 8% of your overall monthly budget. That includes if you have 2 cars, then the monthly payments for both of them has to be less than 8% of your monthly budget. Another thing they don't want is they don't want you to be paying more in car payments each month than you are contributing to your investments. So let's say, for example, you have 2 car payments of $400 each, you got $800 a month going to car payments. But if you're only saving $200 a month in your investments, they say that's backwards, so that doesn't work for them. So you need to rearrange your financial situation with the cars so that you can be contributing more to your investments than you're paying for your cars each month. Again, they say don't necessarily pay off the mortgage earlier, or at least wait till step 9 when you can do that. But in the meantime, put your money to work for you in investments instead of paying off the mortgage early. Another huge difference between Dave Ramsey and the Money Guys is credit cards. They do not think that credit cards are bad. What they do think is that any and all credit card debt is bad. So if you have any credit card debt, then you probably need to cut those cards up, get out of debt, and figure out a different change of your behaviors. But if you pay off your credit cards every month and you've never had credit card debt, The Money Guys do not have a problem with using credit cards for reward points and for benefits, just don't ever have credit card debt. And if that's a problem for you, then you might not want to use credit cards. And they talk about what they call the 88 times rule. What this basically means is if you contribute $1 into an investment account at age 20, by the time you retire at age 65, that dollar will have gone 88 times. It'll be worth $88. That's assuming a 10% rate of return, but they call that their 88 times rule to emphasize the fact that $1 bill to a 20-year-old can become $88 if it's invested. But if it's spent, it only got you $1 worth of value. Again, they take more of a mathematical and a technical approach to wealth building. So if you don't have the bad habits, then this is a great way to go. So what's my take on all this? You know, I think both systems are great and they have different target audiences. Dave Ramsey focuses on behavior. If you have a lot of bad habits surrounding money, Dave's approach is great. You might need some hard and fast rules, some tough love to make those behavioral changes in order to be successful with money. If you struggle with credit card debt, if you struggle with consumption or overspending or not keeping track of your money with a budget, then the rules that he puts in place for you will be beneficial to your behavioral changes over time, so you can develop those good money habits. On the flip side, if you don't struggle with bad money habits, it's just a matter of not having the right knowledge or the right education around what am I supposed to do next with my next dollar bill, I just don't know, then the Money Guy's approach with the financial order of operations is fantastic for you because it's not trying to change your habits and behavior, you just don't know the next step. So this is a great approach for you. They even refer to their listeners as financial mutants, meaning that they're not the norm in society. I honestly don't think one is better than the other. I think they have different audiences and different people that they're gonna help. It depends on who you are. Where do you stand in terms of your money habits? That will determine which one you prefer to use. And I would give you the freedom to work outside of any framework if it works best for you. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here. I think the key is to have a strategy that works for you and that you can stick with over the long term. If you work best within a system and you're a rule follower, then pick one or the other and just stick to it. So that's what you need to know for the baby steps, the financial order of operations, and my take on what you can be doing next.